Tether started off with money, right, with the stablecoin. And now they're going into satellites and brain chips. Musk is doing brain chips and satellites, and he took over a social network, arguably for the user data. And now he's turning or has made it very explicit his intentions to turn Twitter X into a bank that he hopes to be half of the financial system. Why is that happening? It's very odd. And then when you consider all these like PayPal link ups, well, of course, Musk being a co-founder of PayPal, it's all very like.
Bitcoin Bros fam, welcome back to the channel. That was Whitney Webb, the author of One Nation Under Blackmail, talking about how Elon Musk is involved with the United States using the dollar to gain control over other countries and maintain control over the rest of the world. In today's clip, she talks about the dollar being weaponized because of the world reserve status and how the U.S. has used that to manipulate other countries and gain more power. He goes into depths about how stablecoins plan into all of this and how all of this corruption is chained together. I recommend you guys watch this one all the way to the end. Leave your thoughts in the comments below and think about what the solution to all these problems could be that she's talking about in today's clip. This was from a recent interview she just did, and think about how Bitcoin and other cryptos could play into all of this. Let's go ahead and check out the clip.
Is that it's important to keep in mind that like when the petrodollar system has been, the standard for keeping the dollar the global, or reserve currency, the US has gone to war and like killed millions of people to defend that. One of the likely motivations, obviously there's more than one, but one of the key ones in invading Iraq, I would argue, was the fact that Saddam Hussein, not long before the invasion, had started selling oil in euros instead of dollars and made a lot more money, showing by example to other, other OPEC members that they could make more money selling in different currencies than the dollar. And then, of course, you have the case of Libya in 2011, where Gaddafi was trying to move to a gold-backed currency called the dinar and was selling that to African countries, a lot of which either use dollars or they use, French financial stuff. And that's why you had the US and France essentially lead that regime change operation with devastating consequences for Libya, which used to be the safest country in Africa, then became the most dangerous and has been cited as an example of or a reason for why immigration got so out of control in Europe after that point. So there are cases where the U.S. government, or rather U.S. empire, is willing to go to extreme lengths to defend the dollar. So the idea that they would just sit idly by and just like let dollarization happen without having some sort of plan in the works, especially knowing that they couldn't keep this going indefinitely and that the world was going to move at some point to a post-oil economy. I think it's important to keep in mind that these people have been very serious and played very dirty and created insane instability just to keep the dollar the global reserve currency, because it gives a lot of advantages just to the US. And I fully feel that they intend to keep those advantages, even if it means a different system. And the big picture is that countries like Argentina and also Lebanon and several countries throughout the world have been targeted by economic warfare for a very long time. Argentina is a very good example. You could argue it began in the 70s and the 80s, and with the economic policy. I mean, when Argentina was a military dictatorship, some of the financial policies they adopted were completely insane. You had a neoliberal in power during the 90s who was very bad for Argentina, in my opinion, Carlos Menem. And then you had their economic collapse in 2001, which, again, you could argue was a direct consequence of a lot of those policies, both of the dictatorship and of Menem's presidency. And then you have the IMF come in and all these other entities. And what they try and do after the 2001 economic collapse is have Argentina engage in things like debt for land swaps, debt for resources swaps. And this has been going on not just in Argentina, but lots of, most of Latin America, arguably, for a very long time. And it's a resource grab. We're the engineers of that expressly. And by blowing out Latin American debt in the 80s and 90s, it was a way to basically yoke Latin America to the United States and, or more broadly, a lot of the transnational economic interests that, are based in the United States, like Wall Street banks, for example. They engineered a lot of this. And so the situation in Argentina now didn't just come out of nowhere. And obviously Argentina's central bank has a lot of the blame, but that also didn't happen in a vacuum. Presidents appointed the heads of the central bank that made those policies. And even someone like Milei, who's railed against the central bank of Argentina, put a former central bank president in a top post in his cabinet. So these are choices that have been made by politicians. As someone who's been and reported from the ground on Argentina and on Argentinian politics, the corruption there, they just don't even, there's politicians in Argentina that don't even try to hide how corrupt they are. It's just flagrant in some instances in a way I've never experienced anywhere else in the entire world. So I honestly think that what's happening in Argentina, yes, those people may need stable coins because of the current economic situation, but I think it was engineered to be that way. They were engineered into that position.
And
who benefits from that? The same people that I would argue created the solution and created the problem. I just want to add really quick about dollarization. Mark and I feel like a lot of the goal of this is covert dollarization through stablecoins. And dollarization has happened in specific Latin American countries in the past, Ecuador, for example, El Salvador. And what happens then is that when they're dollarized, those countries lose their financial sovereignty. They become dependent on decisions of the Fed, and a lot of consequences come from that. So this is an effort by the same architects of even those instances in Ecuador and El Salvador to essentially foist the same thing on Latin America, but under a more, it doesn't seem like overt dollarization when it's stablecoins that aren't directly connected to the US government, but they are connected directly to the US Treasury system, for example. And then we also have some of these companies that Zappo are connected to, for example, that are also backed by this Endeavor company that is the focus of this piece, like Satellogic, which was also a key focus of our previous article, Debt from Above. And if you look at the board on Satellogic, you have the former head of the Treasury Department, Steve Mnuchin. You have Howard Lutnick of Cantor Fitzgerald, one of the main, people involved in the Treasury system, right? And then you have someone from the Rohatyn Group, and the Rohatyn Group is named for Nick Rohatyn, who basically led the Latin American debt policies of J.P. Morgan throughout the 1980s, netting the bank an insane amount of money and really aggravating the Latin American debt crisis as we know it today. So why are all those people on the board of the satellite company, for example? And why do these people pop up at Zappo? Why are these people that also are, involved in stablecoins like PayPal, for example, with PYUSD, why are they all over Endeavor, the PayPal mafia? I think it's so much that it's very hard to ignore and write it off as a coincidence.